Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Hurlin podcast with your host Mark Kennedy. Joined again this week by Ruairi Walsh and Kieran Collins. And we're delighted to have on Leo O'Connor, Limerick hurling legend, 2024 Offaly Under-20 hurling manager, All-Ireland winner, and current hurling coach for the Under-20s in Offaly with us tonight. Leo, how are things?
All right, now Mark, driving back down from Tullamore, we're after getting our wings clipped tonight by Dublin. A very good Dublin Under-20 team tonight, but we let ourselves down in ways that we probably didn't perform to the best of our ability. And look, at inter-county level, they're the things that you get exposed to. But look, we're in a situation, we're in the quarter-final. We'll gather ourselves together on Friday night and we go again. That's the way it is. That's inter-county season this year. That's the way it is.
Yeah, how are things going in Offaly? I know 2024, magnificent year for yourself in Offaly, and you're building again anyway, another good crop of players.
Yeah, look, like there's 24 between the three All-Irelands, 22 minor All-Ireland, 23 and 24 All-Ireland Under-20 or 20 finals there. There's 24 players that have stepped up to the mark. That's really, that's exceptional for what has happened in that period of time. And I've no doubt there's 3 or 4 tonight's players that will be able to step up to the mark as well in due course. And that's what Offaly need to do now for the next couple of years, is getting 3 and 4 through every year and making sure players are developing. And it's getting them to the next level and getting them up to the pace of it is really, really important, because, as I said earlier, when you get to inter-county, it can be very cruel at times, and that's the way inter-county game has gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks to you for joining anyway tonight, Rory and Kieran as well.
No problem.
I suppose, lads, do we want to just review the Under-20 games? I know we're recording on Wednesday night here, and Leo's provided a good synopsis of the Offaly Dublin game. But what caught your eye tonight, Rory, on the Under-20s?
Well, it was a smash and grab and Thurles for Clare. Didn't play really well, and it looked like Tip had seen the game out, even though they had just gone to 14 players. A double yellow card, and but still were playing really well with 14 players. And just at the end, Clare hit them for 2-1 in the last 2 minutes to win the match by a point. So it just showed, never give up and hang in there, and the game can swing in a moment. And Mark O'Cleary from Éireog, who had started the previous 2 games and lost his place, came in and got the second goal from Costello, scored 1-1 from midfield. We talked about him before, Mark, from Ballyea. He's been impressive for the Clare 20 so far. So I'm sure he'd be delighted to get out of Thurles with a win. And there's been a bit of a rivalry, I suppose, between those 2 teams over the last couple of years at that age group in particular. I suppose there's bigger games to come when it comes to the semi-final and final, but the 3 wins kind of books Clare's place into the knockout stages. So, that's where they stand tonight anyway. And and the other game, I think you were keeping an eye on that one, Mark, was Limerick and Waterford.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just unfortunate for Limerick, but 0 for 3. They're knocked out of Munster Championship round robin tonight. And it was a close run thing again, 1 point loss to Waterford. Thought Waterford were probably the more cohesive side, particularly in the first half. But Limerick made adjustments and really powered into it. But I think the 19 wides do really speak the tale of the tape here, Leo, really down the stretch. We were talking off air here. But again, you really need to take those chances when you're a little bit more dominant.
Yeah, as I said, Mark, I didn't see it now tonight, but when you're going down the stretch, when you get into the last 10 minutes and you're going down the stretch and you're in a game, they're the chances that you've really got to take. That makes all the difference between winning and losing. And unfortunately for Limerick tonight, beaten by a point. But I will turn around and say, I've played Cork, Clare, Tip, Waterford and Limerick this year. And I was only just talking during the week to someone, and I said that Waterford are a team that I thought we played Waterford below in South East University in Waterford there 6 weeks ago, and I thought that Waterford were very, as you said, a very cohesive team, very physically strong and very fast. They had loads of pace all over the place. There's no doubt about it. They're building on that team that won the All-Ireland minor last year, and you can when you get that over the line and you win in All-Ireland like they won last year in All-Ireland minor, that gives them that extra bit of confidence and that bit of experience, so that when they're coming down the final stretch tonight, that they're away from home in Limerick and they're able to get over the line. Unfortunately for them, they have been they've been so close against Cork, and certainly against Tip as I think it's
Clare, yeah, they should have beaten Clare.
Above and yeah, they probably should have beaten Clare that night, above and Clare as well. And Clare got a late goal that night. But as I said, when you look at it, when you analyse the two teams like Clare, Waterford, they've all been contesting All Irelands in the last number of years. Waterford an All Ireland minor last year, and Clare, the form team, got in with having won an All Ireland minor at their age level. So look, it's still the predominant teams are still coming to the top, and Cork are working really hard with Ruairi Walsh. It'll depend on what access they get them later in the Munster Championship, and I've no doubt that Cork, they're 4 points and 6 now. Tip have 4 and 6, and Clare has 6 and 6. So it looks like now it's going to boil down to those three semi-final. But look, Waterford can still. I don't know whether Waterford can still work their way back into it, but they'd have to get results. Would have to go their way, I think, to be back in it. But you see the benefits of a win, and as I said, Waterford, no doubt about it. Next year they'll be looking at stepping up again for the victories next year, and they have a good guy in charge of them with James O'Connor. He's a very, very astute, and Paul Flynn is on the sideline as well. So these are guys that they know that can pass on the experience to all these Waterford players over the next number of years. And look, it doesn't surprise me tonight because, as I said, I've seen Waterford, what they've done in the past, but in this year against us in particular, and I know that they had good results against other teams as well. So from that point of view, look, it's probably very disappointing from Limerick's point of view that they haven't won a match this year in the Under-20 Championship, and it's something that they have to look forward and go at it again and gather themselves, and that's the most important thing.
And Kieran, anything stand out to you tonight? Wexford had a good win against Kildare, but also Galway had a narrow win against Kilkenny.
Yeah, I think just to add to the Munster Championship there for Limerick, I think huge kudos to Waterford. We would have been talking about Waterford's underage record over the last couple of years, and it was borderline abysmal really, I suppose, at minor and under 20. So they've obviously done a lot of work behind the scenes there and got a good got their minor All Ireland last year, but they're not hedging all their bets on that one team. They put Dara Sullivan and David Franklin over the minors this year, and I suppose they're going to try and add more lads, keep the conveyor belt coming. And look, Waterford as a county, they need it. They've got a good few years without adding to the senior team, so it's hugely important. On the other side of this is for Limerick, where it's not just this year. I think last year and possibly the year before, they haven't been winning matches, and that's what's worrying. I suppose if you're competitive, it's one thing, but I suppose it's some of the manner in the games they've lost. I suppose it's a concern, going forward, where we have a senior team where there's 75% of the players are of the one age, and I suppose you're looking ahead, not that far ahead, but you're just looking ahead, wondering, when these guys do start stepping away, I suppose what level of player do we have coming in to slot into that senior team? And look, it's not a major concern yet, but it is something Limerick would want to be addressed, I think, over a shorter period rather than the long term.
I suppose, guys, we can move from the under-20s to the Senior Hurling Championship, kicked off with a vengeance last weekend.
From Leinster, the main talk point, I suppose, was the performance of the Offaly lads above against Dublin. Dublin were in a Division 1B National Hurling League final only 2 weeks ago, and they put up a really good show against Clare that day. Although I think both teams that day were playing certainly weren't going 100%. It was a good game from before they went into championship, and I think Clare got the benefits of that in Munster. From an Offaly point of view, against the Dubs started really well against Offaly, and Offaly pushed up in the puck out after 20 minutes, and the game took a different life altogether. Tactics, the Offaly boys began to hurl with a bit of flair and that bit of freedom that they play with, and I think they took the challenge to Dublin, and I think Dublin were a little bit shell shocked. But there's been nothing between Offaly and Galway over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's one of those situations where Offaly last year got a very good result above in the National Hurling League above in Croke Park, and got promotion out of it and got to a Division 1B final in 2025. And look, this year National Hurling League in Division 1 for them. Look, they've gained huge experience, and that's something that the benefits of that going forward for these lads is huge. And look, both teams, I think, and I just spoke to a few of the Dublin lads tonight. They were saying they were disappointed, and I know the Offaly lads were definitely disappointed because there was an opportunity there for Offaly to snatch the game late in the game. In terms of Dublin, we will certainly, I think, will feel certainly a small bit aggrieved that they felt that they were a little bit better and they pushed on, certainly after beating Limerick last year. But look, it's a learning curve for both those two teams, and I think going into this weekend's games, like Offaly have a hard challenge to go to Pearse Stadium and try and turn over Galway. In terms of what Dublin have to do, you'd fully expect Dublin to get over the line against Kildare, above in Parnell Park. So that sets a different tone. And then after that, this weekend, when you look at Dublin, and this is what I'd be worried for Dublin. Dublin have Wexford. They have to go to Wexford. They have to go to Kilkenny. You know what I mean? And then the Galway match. So in terms of that, after this weekend, it's a very much backs to the wall stuff for Dublin. So I just think that it could open up for other counties, and maybe I know Offaly will be certainly looking at the two matches in O'Connor Park and Tullamore, where they have to play Kilkenny and where they have to play Wexford, and certainly the last match then is away to Kildare. If Offaly get a result, which I feel they're more than capable of getting a result above in Tullamore against either Kilkenny or Wexford, and I know they're games that they're going to target and go hell for leather on. They've picked up one or two injuries, I think, going into the weekend. I know Dan Ravenhill has a little bit of a hamstring strain, and I think Cathal King has an ankle injury. So there are two players that started midfield from last Sunday. Last Saturday night, I don't think will be starting this weekend, maybe. So look, they're small things, but they're a big thing. They're a big thing when you're without your two midfielders going into the next round of the Leinster Championship. Kilkenny will be very disappointed with what happened above in Pearse Stadium. There's no doubt about that. Their pride is hurt. There's a lot of people asking questions down there, what's going on. But the simple fact of the matter is, Kilkenny will always be Kilkenny. They'll always back themselves. They have the confidence. And I think that maybe they might go back to what the traditional side of Kilkenny hurling always was. And they'll go out and go man to man and try and see where it takes them from here on in the Leinster Championship. So look, they'll look up and they'll say, their backs to the wall, and they'll come out and they'll start to hurl and go out and start to express themselves. And you see it at various stages, like that match against Tip that they played below in the National Hurling League. They went out and went at it that day. So Kilkenny are never too far away from it, but there are little shooting stars coming out of it to say that there's worrying signs for them. In terms of Wexford, Wexford always seem to pull out a performance when they need it. And that's the most important thing. They went up and turned over Kildare last week, and that's given them confidence. And coming to the end of the National Hurling League, they got one or two victories to give them the confidence to push on for the championship. So certainly, look, testing weekend all over in Leinster Championship. I thought for Kilkenny in particular, Offaly will look at it as a positive. Dublin will say, yeah, we weren't beaten, and they're trying to build on what they did last year against Limerick. So look, there's signs for everyone. There's encouragement for everyone. And as I said, I've no doubt Kilkenny will be fighting to come back into it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leo. Kieran, we'll get you in there. I know you're based down in Wexford. So what's the overriding feeling from Wexford after that win against Kildare and probably looking ahead to this Kilkenny game at the weekend?
Yeah, I think I think Kildare brought them into a dogfight, something that Wexford wouldn't have wanted. Didn't see the match, but talking to people who were there, the pitch condition was, questionably unplayable, heavily sanded, and I suppose it had an impact on the game. Look, Kildare, to their credit, they battled hard, within level at half time, and I think just the last, 10 minutes or so saw Wexford pull away. Still heavily reliant on Lee Chin, contributing, I think it was at 112 on the day, 1-2 from play. I think the younger players who would have been applauded in the league, Simon Roach especially, Jack Redmond as well, who would have scored 3-3 against Kildare in the league, having difficult days, and I suppose it just shows that league form, while it's good to have players coming into a championship on form. I suppose it's different. A championship is different. And I suppose for the younger guys especially, it's hard to make their mark on it. Going in towards the weekend, look at the Wexford will never fear Kilkenny. I think they've had their number, a good few times in the last 10 years. I suppose it's like, Ireland when an England jersey comes up in front of them, something, it's a similar effect for Wexford. I think the bookies kind of have Kilkenny 2-9, Wexford 7-2. It's, maybe if it was a Wexford team of maybe 2 years ago with the likes of Ruairi Connor in there and Liam McGovern, you'd be a lot more confident. I suppose there's a little bit of an unknown with them still. But just I think Kilkenny are seriously lacking forwards. You look at TJ Reid is still, huge part of of the game for him, and like without him you'd wonder how well they would go. Like Owen Cody for me isn't doing enough. Like he only scored 2 points the last day. They're going to be without John Donnelly, who received the red card. Mossy Keown was quiet. Adrian Mullen, I'm not sure what the story is, but Mullen, he's out injured. Will he be back? And I suppose if you're looking at matchups, like Shane Reck, I imagine would pick up Owen Cody, and I'd be thinking maybe Damien Reck pick up Cian Kenny. And outside of them two players, you're wondering where the threats are coming from, for Kilkenny point of view. And then at the back, I think Hugh Lawler, it's just, he's a massive loss to them. I think with the likes of a Dublin coming, where Heatherton is going to be in on the square, how to deal with that. Like the only thing is, this isn't a shock. This has been coming. I suppose we're looking at the Kilkenny. It's the same team for the last few years. They haven't been adding young players to it, or anyone that young players coming in haven't made their stake in the team. And I think there is. I agree with Leo. There are definitely worrying signs for Kilkenny going forward. They will go further than what most teams would, just based on their attitude, and they have that confidence to back themselves in games. But going forward into next year, the year after, you do worry about Kilkenny hurling just on, I suppose, the lack of players that have been coming into the panel for the last couple of years.
No, absolutely, Kieran. Great points there. Rory, get you in there in terms of, I'm based in Galway. I've seen an awful lot of maroon and white jerseys floating around Clarenbridge and Oranmore since this Kilkenny win. I suppose get your verdict on this Kilkenny performance first, but also the Galway performance, particularly on these debutants, Aaron Nyland, Jason Rabbit and Rory Burke, who contributed 3-11 of this scoreline.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think the red card... a red card is always a factor, but Galway were well on top and in control when the red card happened. It wasn't like it changed the game or anything. So, but like John Donnelly being suspended is a big factor. Like he's a guy, another guy they can't do without. Even though he wasn't on the score sheet, Garrod Dunn wasn't, Mossy Keown wasn't. Like that's 3 of the start and 6 forwards didn't register a single score, and TJ Reid just a point from play as well. So it's a massive worry. And what we've been saying about Kilkenny the last few years is you'd have your 4 or 5 core forwards, when Mullen is fit as well. But the other guys that have coming in, it's like a merry-go-round. One guy's in one day, the next day doesn't go well, the next day somebody else is in. You'd wonder, it's a tough spot to be in for a Kilkenny young lad coming into, because it doesn't seem to, they never seem to get 2 or 3 games in the spin, to settle in there. It seems to be very unsettled, if you claim the 15 jersey for a game or the 12 jersey. So very worrying signs for Kilkenny from the Galway point of view. They are the real, suppose, bolter this year. Just think back to how poor they were against Tipperary last year in the Gaelic Grounds in the All-Ireland quarter-final. They were abysmal, and then suddenly this year, just that injection of youth and Micheál Donoghue have another year to work with them, and you can see the plan of how the style of play. They've all bought into it, and he has come up with a style that suits the players he has as well. And the likes of Rory Burke, what I find, he seems to have everything: power, pace, lovely striking. Aaron Nyland's come just the right time. Jason Rabbit, still in secondary school, no fear in there, and just having a target as well, as we can see with Limerick and Gillane, just having a target that you can strike long to when you're under pressure. It's something very effective for teams, and Jason Rabbit looks like he could be that target man going forward for Galway. So the half-back line now as well with Dahi Burke, who has been injury prone the last few years, but hopefully he gets a clean run of it this year. he really adds to the Galway team, and he's there. And with him in at 6, and Mannion and Gavin Lee had a really strong half back line. All good strikers while they can get scores as well. I know we've said this before, and Galway have sometimes flattered to deceive, but they do look to be the real deal this year. And you would be shocked if they don't get out of Leinster, especially after the win at the weekend against Kilkenny. It would take a massive implosion for that to happen. But I think, Micheál Donoghue is probably looking at, minimum All-Ireland semi-final, getting to All-Ireland semi-final, and, giving these young lads their first taste of big game in Croke Park in a match like that. Leinster title there for them as well, the way things are this year. But I also like, Darragh Neary, he came in against Limerick in the league game. I thought he was very impressive coming off the bench. Came off the bench again the last against Kilkenny, got 2 nice points. Like, they have a bit more strength and depth this year as well, and massive options, like Tom Monaghan couldn't get a starting spot in the team. Colin Malloy, he came in good forward as well, and having a bit of experience like Conor Cooney to come in off the bench as well. So look, they're definitely the one team that really have jumped forward this year. Offaly too, as Leo said, like there was a real kind of flair to the way Offaly played. And, I just thought as well, puckouts from Hoare were superb. He was able to find that pocket of space because, Offaly having the biggest set of forwards apart from Dignan, but how many times was he able to bounce the ball in front of, the half forward line, to their advantage where they were running onto a bouncing ball. I thought was, superb use, especially in the first half. And, and Offaly played to their strength of their forwards and went at it, created a bit of a shootout. And I think that suits them in a game like that. And it'd be interesting to see how they shape up against Galway in Salt Hill. It's going to be a tough task, but if they can, produce a second big performance, Leo could be right, Offaly could be right in the mix there to try and, get into that top 3 spot in Leinster. But, as we know, things can change very quickly. But yeah, for the minute, I would say Offaly and Galway definitely seem to be the teams on the way up. Yeah, hopefully as well, Wexford can put up a massive performance against Kilkenny, because if Kilkenny are to lose their first 2 games, they're in serious trouble. And the unthinkable could happen where Kilkenny may not finish in the top 3, but we've also seen Kilkenny rebound from positions like this in the past as well. So all to play for really going forward. So yeah, I suppose with all the talk about Munster going into it, Leinster did deliver on Saturday. It looks like it's going to be very, very interesting in Leinster Championship as well.
I just want to add to that, Mark. Just that point for Offaly could be huge. I think, like, when it comes to the Kildare game, you'd fancy Offaly to get over them. I think it'll all come down to the Offaly Wexford game in Tullamore. And I know it's a game that Wexford will definitely, they'll fear. It's a tough place to go. I suppose the last 2 or 3 years they've played them a couple of times, and I suppose they drew once and they struggled against them. And that's the thing with the matchups. I think, like, Offaly, to be fair, have one of the best full forward lines in the country now with Dignan, Charlie Mitchell, and Screeney. For any full back line to try and handle them, it's going to be a tough ask. But I think that'll be a real cup final because 2 points there on top of the point, and if they do beat Kildare 5 points, they're in with a shout, and that's discounting what they might do against Kilkenny or Galway. I think that point could be huge. While they might feel that they should have won or could have won, that point could be huge come the end of the round robin.
No, absolutely, Kieran. Leo, we'll get you back in here. So round 2, so starting on Saturday evening, we've obviously Kilkenny and Wexford in UPMC Nolan Park, then followed on Sunday by Dublin v Kildare in Parnell Park, and then finishing up with Galway and Offaly. I suppose get some predictions from you, Leo, in round 2. Who do you fancy?
Look, I'm going to say something to you here, lads. Like, the Offaly lads, like 10 of that team, 11 of that team that's finished on Saturday night have played against the Ruairi Works and the Iron Islands and the Jason Rabbits, Killian Trayers, and of this world that haven't on that Galway team, and they've come out the right side of results for the last 2 or 3 years at under 20 level. Offaly won't be phased by going to Pearse Stadium. They'll go up and give it one hell of a go and see where it takes them. Right now, if you like, every pundit would probably say it looks like a tall order, but Offaly will leave everything on the field on Saturday night. They're not. I know those lads particularly well. They'll go out and give it a go. They have very little to fear, everything to gain on Saturday night, and it's a free shot at them, to be quite honest, at Galway. And Galway having been trying to be right for the Kilkenny match, which was the big match, you'll all agree, which is the big match in the Leinster Championship, was the Kilkenny-Galway game, because if Kilkenny had gone up and reversed the National Hurling League victory against Galway, it would have asked more questions of Galway, and we'd be talking about a different scenario. Look, my heart would love me to say that I think Offaly have a real chance, but my head is telling me that if Galway played the form, haven't saw him last year. I saw the same match in Tullamore last year, with the Manions, of this world around the place. That experience, that's what Offaly are currently lacking. And the Brian Dignans, Ben Keneally's of this world, if they really step up on Saturday night, I give Offaly a chance, but on a different level, their hurling ability, that experience, I think that probably Galway will get over the line in that one. The biggest match now, and it was traditionally gone back in the 80s, the 90s, was Kilkenny and Wexford. I think that has become the biggest match in the Leinster Championship this year for both those counties, in a sense that if Kilkenny get over the line, okay, they're back on track. They've 2 out of 4. If Wexford get over the line, Wexford are in the driving seat. They're 4 out of 4. So, and that's with Offaly and Galway still to come. So from that point of view, it's very hard when, look, Kilkenny have to throw the kitchen sink at this on the weekend, and they have to try and force the issue against Wexford. They have to go out and attack them. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if Wexford get a result there, because the lack of not confidence, but there's more question marks coming out of Kilkenny these days than there is answers, in my opinion. And look, I'm sticking up for Derek Ling here. They've been hit with massive injuries. The Adrian Mullen injury, like Mossy Keown hasn't over the last year and a half has been carrying niggles. Like Harry Shine is a player that played under 20 with Kilkenny. He's ACL he's out with an ACL. Like losing Walter Walsh off a panel. You losing Hugh Lawler, like the quality of players that Kilkenny are missing off their first 15 is massive. And when you like Billy Ryan over in Australia, he's another player that it's very hard to replace players of that caliber. So sticking up for Derek, a big, huge performance is requested by Kilkenny, and I think maybe just about getting over the line. Don't be surprised if it's a draw, and that throws the whole Leinster Championship wide open. And the other one, I suppose, Dublin have the advantage. It looks like a good point now against Offaly, but certainly they fully expect to get over the line, and improve performance by Dublin. I fully expect them to get over the line against Kildare and get their scoring averages up, because this is going to be a funny Leinster Championship by the time it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree with you there, Leo. Rory, your predictions for round 2 in Leinster?
Yeah, I agree with Lee. Obviously, Dublin are massive favourites in that one. I don't know. I think Kilkenny, just the home advantage will help them against Wexford down in Nolan Park as well. The backs are to the wall for them, and just I know going off the league, but for Wexford to get promoted, they had to go up to Ennis and deliver performance, and they didn't that day. Now I know Kilkenny bring out the best in Wexford, as Kieran said, but I don't know. I think they're just overly reliant on Chin, and I think Kilkenny will target that and try and cut off, the effect of Chin, which is easier said than done. But, if Chin is held scoreless, like, are Wexford going to get enough scores elsewhere, like the likes of Simon Roach, who actually had a super game against Clare that day in the league. And as Kieran said, he needs to step up, and some of these lads who were showing promise in the league. But I think there's question marks over both teams. And I just think with Kilkenny still having the likes of Owen Cody on the pitch, like, I think if he gets injured, Kilkenny will be in real trouble. But they still have enough experience there, I think, to maybe see this one through. But it could be a real cracking game. And if Wexford are right in there coming in the end of it, like, you're going to have a nervous home crowd there. And, Wexford may take advantage of that. But I'm going to go Kilkenny there. And Galway and Offaly could be in terms of quality, could be the game of the round, because, both teams with, attacking young talent, both looking to put up big scores in it. That could be a real kind of a, goal fest. It could be something akin to what we saw in Ennis as well, like just up and down goals and high scoring game. And I think, just Galway, they're hard to beat up in Salt Hill now. And after that win against Kilkenny, they'll be buoyant. And I just see them getting over the line. So Galway, Kilkenny, and Dublin for me.
Absolutely. And Kieran, complete the set here for Leinster.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. Yeah, I think Dublin were disappointed in ways of the performance. As was I. I think, after beating Limerick last year, we'd expected Dublin to make a few more strides this year. I don't think they have. If anything, I would say they've maybe gone back a little bit. I found them a bit kind of maybe over-reliant on Henderson and full forward. They're trying to, while he's a big man and he's a huge ball winner, maybe I'd like to see him varied up a little bit more. But I think they definitely have enough for Kildare come the weekend. Kilkenny Wexford, look, I know a lot of these Wexford lads in the panel or with the management team the last 2 years. I just see with Kilkenny, yes, they are missing players, but I suppose Wexford are too. Like the loss of Rory O'Connor is huge. I agree with Rory. There's an over-reliance on Lee Chin. If Kilkenny can hold him, the other 5 forwards they lack consistency, I suppose, really. What you want out of them some days and then other days you don't. And I suppose that's the big fear for Wexford this year is a little bit of unknown, young players like Simon Roach who have showed great promise, but they have to do it in the championship. And I suppose until they start doing it game on game, you suppose what you're going to get from them every day you go out. I just, to me, growing up, you rarely saw Kilkenny play bad 2 days in a row. Look, they're going to be up against it. Wexford will bring everything to it, but I just think at home, I don't think there'll be much in it, but I think Kilkenny will have enough. And Galway Offaly, Rory mentioned earlier about the subs that come on: Darren Erie, Conor Cooney, Colin Malloy, Tom Allen. They all contributed as well, which is, I'd say, me Hunter was thrilled about. They all got on the score sheet, which is exactly what you want your subs coming onto the field, putting their hand up for selection again for the next day. I suppose Galway are building a bit of a panel now. Look at I would associate Galway as being a hot and cold team in years gone by. It's hard to see if they've lost that kind of mentality. I suppose we won't know until the next few games carry on. But you just have to be really impressed, especially with the younger brigade coming in. They're like lads who've been playing there for years. A big game for them starting championship and a senior grade. They look right at home. Really impressed with Darren Erie as well. I'd say he's a lad who's chomping at the bit to get going as well for a starting place. So I think this Galway will have enough. I'm impressed with what I've seen with Galway this year so far. To be honest, I would expect them to probably be favourites for Leinster at this stage, and it'll take a fair team to stop them.
Suppose we can switch focus here to the Munster Senior Hurling Championship. Leo, we'll get you in here. I suppose what stood out for you last weekend on round one?
What really stood out for me last weekend, round one, is Cork's attitude and their hunger against Tip on Sunday. I think that, on reflection, the National Hurling League final, I think Limerick were going at about somewhere between 85-90%, and I think Cork were about 80-85% that day. And I think that it's going to be one hell of a battle on Sunday. When you see John Kiley coming out and he's encouraging the Limerick crowd to get down to Cork because he knows that it's going to be some atmosphere there on Sunday, and I think that it's one that Limerick will really do well. If Limerick get a win down there, it's going to be absolutely massive result for Limerick for the rest of the year. If you don't get a result down there, you're then looking down the barrel of a gun, having to go to Ennis the following week and get over the line below Ennis. And what Clare did last week against Waterford, scoring 233, 35 scores in a championship match is no mean feat. And like the other side of that was Waterford scoring 421 against Clare. So like there's questions all over the Munster Championship after round one. Tip were not next or near full throttle the weekend, and I think the benefits of getting to a National Hurling League final 2 weeks ago for Cork was very evident, because the early part of the game, when if Tip were going to get into the game, that early start that they needed, but Cork were very up to the pace of it straight away, and you could see the energy levels going through Cork, and their fitness levels and their physique and their hunger to win the battle. If they weren't catching the ball in the air, like Rob Downey, Owen Downey in the half back line, and Mark Coleman were very, very impressive for Cork last week. And like if you came out of last year's All Ireland hurling final, there are question marks that was over the collapse of Cork in the second half. But certainly, what Ben has brought in, he's brought in a different kind of setup in it. I think they're more a compact unit now. Look, Limerick will ask all sorts of questions of Cork the weekend, and it's going to really tell Cork where they are in terms of their progression towards an All Ireland. Certainly, beating Tip is a massive, massive lift for Cork, and that intensity. Like if Cork were beaten on Sunday, with Limerick coming down this week, it would have been a massive task. Sore bodies. It's going to take players like 2 or 3 days to get over championship matches now. So when you look at it, and they're coming down the line now, going into Páirc Uí Chaoimh, into their own den of inequity, taking on Limerick, and they'll be up for it, and they'll throw everything at Limerick. I think it's probably going to be the game of the championship of the round robin series, both in Leinster and Munster. I think Sunday's game is going to be absolutely massive. Like it's one for. I think it's going to be one of the games for hurling. Like Cork came up last year, and it would have been very disappointed in the first round of the championship last year, shipping that 15 or 16 point defeat to Limerick in a glorious day. And Limerick thought they were on, it set up Limerick. But I think there's a different dynamic to Limerick this year. I think this is, a lot of them are seeing this as, right, we're going at this, we're based around championship. Both managers obviously stated that they want to win all matches at all times. And I think Sunday's one, as I said, it's a huge one for Limerick, because if Limerick get off to a good start on Sunday against Cork, and they build that confidence in the first 15-20 minutes, that'll set Limerick nicely up, because they know that they'll go Cork, and Cork know this too, that Limerick will keep coming at them in waves. So that's like, my heart and my head wants Limerick to win this one. Like, I'll back Limerick on that for this weekend.
Absolutely. Rory got you in there. I know you were in Cusack Park in this last weekend. It's an absolute humdinger of a tie there. I suppose get your thoughts on that, and then moving into that Waterford Tipperary game.
Yeah, and look, there really should be a health warning for Clare fans going to Munster, because like, no matter what score Clare seem to put up, they always seem to have to fight it out with a last minute save or goal mouth scramble. And I was just saying to the lads at the game, like, can they ever just win easy for once, like, and give us a break? But look, it makes for exciting games, and it's gas. Like, who'd have thought, like, when Brian Lohan came in over Clare, everybody thought Clare would just become a real a lot more defensive and really tough team to kind of play against. But instead, he's like approach things from the forwards point of view, and it's all like, Kevin Keegan will score more than you, kind of a real open games is what he's looking for. And you couldn't blame him with the forwards Clare have. That's just their strength. So as open as possible is what suits Clare. But at the same time, that'll only take you so far. Like, sometimes you have to be able to shut up shop at the back. And just a small thing, but maybe with 15 minutes to go and Clare being up, I think it was 7-8 points, like, there's your chance to maybe bring in a bit of experience, like John Conlon, sit in behind Niall O'Farrell, and help see the game out and shut off that space that was there, because there was a glaring amount of space for a team that were up 7 or 8 points, like, to give Waterford that opportunity to come back in. And like, even now, I don't want to criticise Niall O'Farrell, because I thought he had a very solid game in his debut at centre back in Munster Championship, but even for that fourth Waterford goal, he's up tackling a Waterford player 45 yards out from the Waterford goal. He's 45 yards from his position, and the cover isn't there. And Waterford go up, a flow and move from Waterford, and gaps everywhere, and get that fourth goal. So look, that's maybe where that bit of experience comes in, and maybe having Conlon there, like, obviously Lohan doesn't think he can see out a 70-minute game at the minute, but that's, I think, the perfect time to use him, is see out a game, bring in the experience. But look, it made for a cracking game. Like, it was perfect conditions. I think it was the first day of the year so far, 2026, where there wasn't really a breeze, because since Sunday we've been blown out of it with wind, and for the previous 3.5 months we have as well. So look, perfect conditions for hurling, and what a game. And it just shows, like, the skill level of players at the minute, like, scores from all angles, and it was just a feast of hurling as such. But look, warning signs for Clare going forward, no doubt about it. Like, the goals they gave away, and goal chances as well they gave away, you're not going to get away with that every day. And it's going to be very hard to put up whatever score at the other end to match what you're going to give away. So they definitely need to tighten up and sort out a few things at the back. And interestingly, at the game, I kind of was, giving out about Conor Cleary and the high balls come in, but it actually wasn't his man both times. But maybe Clare should have matched up and put Cleary on the biggest threat in the air for those high balls coming in, rather than them having marking, let's say a player that wasn't going to be an aerial threat for those, especially the long range free that came in from Billy Nolan, that led to the penalty. So I think just getting that matchup right when there's high balls coming in, especially from frees where you can set up, is important. And actually the first one was a sideline, so another opportunity to get things set up well. But yeah, from a Waterford point of view, look, they definitely never gave up, kept at it, and they had a belief themselves, that they could hurt Clare, and they did at times, especially at the end. And I took that save from Quilligan in injury time. Had that gone in like it was anyone's game, and Waterford would have had the momentum. So in the end, Clare saw it out, but in a way, not really. Just the full-time whistle came just in time in one way, but they really need to, learn how to kill off games, because it's something that they haven't been doing over the years. And I was just saying, if Limerick had gone up 9 points, they'd have won by 15-16. Cork, apart from the All-Ireland final last year, they're a crowd you don't want to give a lead to as well. They traditionally see things out, but Clare just have to learn how to do that. But overall, I thought it was a great start to the championship. And look, Clare have the 2 points in the bag, and it's going to keep them with 3 opportunities really to get into that top 3. So, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Greg, Kieran, get you in there as well. What stood out for you last weekend in Munster?
I suppose just starting the Cork Tipperary game. I think for me, the most important for Cork was, especially in the second half, Tipperary's puck out. They absolutely smothered it. The Cork forwards absolutely smothered Tipperary. They couldn't get the ball to the 65 to even try and deliver. Just really high work rate, and I suppose something you might not associate with Cork in years gone by. So they were really impressive. Just looking at the scoreline though, 4 points in it at the end. Tipperary, I thought were very, very poor. They didn't score from play in the second half till the 64th minute. And you're kind of wondering, should Cork have been out of distance at that stage? I know they, Tip got a goal back with Valentine late on enough in the game. But, they had done the damage, between the 44th and the 59th minute, they outscored Tipperary by 11 points to 1. So, they had the game laid out for themselves. But just, I suppose, to allow Tipperary to come back into touching distance, it does have a few question marks for me there. Great starts for William Buckley and Barry Walsh, 10 points between the two of them. And I think Cork's half-forward line, 12 points combined in the half-forward line, it's great scoring. The Cork have serious stress. I think they do still have question marks, and I suppose they will have a couple of questions for that and come the weekend when Limerick roll into town with the Cork or Clare and Waterford game. I suppose for me, from a Clare point of view, I'd be disappointed that when they went that 6 or 7 clear that they didn't see the game out. I suppose that's what the good teams, I suppose, win games, but the great teams, they win them in style, and I suppose Clare did make it hard for themselves at the end. I was impressed with Waterford. Look, they're kind of a little bit of an unknown. I do think they need the likes of a Prunty back in full back, I like Mark Fitzgerald is a very good player, but I think he's so much hurling. He needs to be a little bit more out the field where he can have an influence. I think Paddy Levy, where he's an unbelievable midfielder, I just don't think he's enough hurling to play the likes of centre back. So I think if they could get a Prunty or a Tyke de Burke back in there, and just allow Mark Fitzgerald even wing back and Levy back to midfield. Callum Lyons, look, he's going to take time to settle back into it after being away. So look, I was impressed with Waterford that they are going to trouble teams. There's no doubt about it, but I suppose, when you look at the score and the scorers, Stephen Bennett scoring 312 out of 421, Desi Hutchinson scored 4, Jamie Barron got 2, Gleeson got 2. Aside from that, the scoring threat, I think Sean Walsh took the goal well, and Mikey Kiley didn't score from play. I still think there's room there for maybe a Ruben Holleran or either for Padraig Fitzgerald, just for a bit of pace in the forward line, because I think they went with the aerial threat, especially in the first half, with Walsh and Kiley inside. I think and they had space in front of the two guys, so they were holding their depth very well. But I think if they had a little bit of pace in there, this might, I suppose, put question marks on teams in different areas. But, look, two good games. I suppose just for Clare, defensively, I suppose, look, Niall Farley had a good game. He's made his debut in the championship. He learned from it. I suppose, but as Rory said, you do his job is to protect the house, I suppose, as such. And at times he wasn't there. And just Sean Wren, player I would have been admired over the last year or two. Really good game with 5 points. And I suppose Clare are an aging team, and they do need these younger guys coming in. And I suppose to get the mix, they do look like they have the mix right with the young and old guys. And I think Clare will be there both for top three.
Lovely.
Just on Kieran, there on the Waterford situation, right? I went down there about 5 weeks ago. I watched the Waterford senior hurling training session below, and I was very, very impressed by him. The level of intensity in training was really, really good, and I think tonight's result even shares where Waterford hurling is right this minute, having won an All-Ireland minor last year, getting the momentum off of that. I think the game this weekend coming against Tip is a really, really tricky game for Clare, or for Tipperary to go down to Waterford this weekend and get a result below. I would not be one bit surprised if Waterford step up to the plate, having scored 421 away from home above an Ennis, which is not easy. Like if you said to any of the Waterford management team on last Sunday morning that they'd score 421 against Clare and still be beaten by 6 points, you'd be kind of scratching your head. Like, I would think that it bit your hand off to score 421 above an Ennis. And I think it's one of the situations where if they get that level of performance, get that level of intensity, and they score 421 against Tip, like having looked at Tip last Sunday, and I think, I hate saying this, and I'm living in Tipperary, but the hangover of winning the All-Ireland last year, and pundits on television refer to it, I think that's a major factor in going forward for Tipperary this year, because they've got suddenly, within the space of 6 days, they've got to get the energy out of themselves to go down and take on a Waterford. Even though Waterford were turned over below, beaten by Clare, it's one of those results where they can still take a lot out of it. There's a lot of positives in it for Waterford. Now, the only negative that I would look at from Waterford's point of view last week is they got a goal and 11 points in frees, or a goal and 12 points in frees. The penalty, and obviously 12 points, and Stephen Bennett scoring the 3-12. But if they get 421 on the board, they're definitely in a major shout again at turning over Tip. And Tip are the ones that are probably under massive pressure then going into their last games.
I suppose, Leah, can we get predictions for you in Munster? I know it's a bit of a landmine field for Munster,
okay.
But round two.
Bit of a, yeah, I'll back my own, back Limerick to beat Cork. Tip, I'll go for the shock. I'll go for Waterford to beat Tip below in Waterford. That's what I will do.
Yeah, Rory, get you in there. Your predictions in Munster for this weekend?
Yeah, I think Limerick are going to win. Look, until Cork prove they can handle the Limerick full forward line, I know in the league final, they probably, if they had a plan for Gillane, they weren't going to show it in the league final, but I think it's worth them dropping a man really deep there to try and, because the problem with Gillane is the supply. If the supply is good, he's nigh unmarkable when he's in the form he's in this year. So be interesting to see what Cork do there. If they get that right, they're in with a great chance, but I don't know, I just think Limerick, they're a bit like Clare in terms of age profile of the team, and they do have, but at the likes of Adam English, Cathal O'Neill, Aidan O'Connor are probably a bit more seasoned than some of the Clare lads coming through. This is their third or fourth year in with Limerick, and there's an expectation in them lads now to step up and be the leaders in the team. But I think signs are good, and I just fancy Limerick, as Leo said, could be an absolutely cracking game. The intensity, I'd say, will be through the roof below, and Limerick there. And I'm also thinking Waterford as well, because as Kieran pointed out, like, Waterford put up the score, but like they have options, they have options besides what played against Clare, like Fitzgerald, like to come in, and as you mentioned, Ruben Hodder. And look, so the guys that didn't perform, and there was 2 or 3 Waterford players, that were a non-factor. Like, I don't remember Michael Kiley having a real possession or a shot, let alone a score. So Like, get the balance right in the forwards, and and as I said, they do have a small bit of momentum coming from Ennis. They didn't, die up there. They came right back and had that chance at the very end as well. So, there is a bit of momentum with them. I think Tip's defeat is a bit more, hurting to Tip. I think, Cork coming to their own yard, and and I think the goal at the end put a bit of a glass on it really for Tipperary, because they were, completely outfought in the second half. And so I'm going to go Waterford and Limerick as well.
Okay, thanks, Rory. And Kieran, over to you.
Yeah, start with Cork and Limerick. I suppose the big question mark for me is, I think Kieran Joyce, the move back to full back so far has worked. I suppose he held Shane O'Brien to a point in the league final, and John McGrath scoreless. So that's 1 point from 2 forwards. It's a good innings in 2 games. Is it a possibility that he might pick up Galan? I suppose there the question marks going to come. I look at 2 years ago when Limerick went to the park to play Cork. It was a penalty at the end that won it. Pat Horgan penalty. There's nothing between the two teams. I think the game last weekend will stand to Cork. Obviously, the 3-week break it's the ideal break for Limerick from the league final. But I suppose just the championship game for Cork will stand to them early. I think for Limerick they need to, I suppose, and something they have been focused on is getting a good start, because you don't want to let Cork, get a good lead in the game and you're chasing it back. I'm expecting big games from Aidan O'Connor, Shane O'Brien, who I suppose were kind of unflattered the last day in the league final. But I think the Limerick's half back line, dealt with Cork in the league final the last day. I think if they can continue to do that, I would see a Limerick win as well. Regarding Tip and Waterford, I'd love to see, for Waterford point of view, if they could get, I'm not sure what the injury is with Prunty, but if they could get Prunty and the Burka back in 3 and 6, just to allow Mark, because Mark Fitch is he's an unbelievable player. I think he's loads of hurling, and I think if you get him back to wing back, he gives them more option going forward. It allows Paddy Levy to go back to midfield, and he's a link man, I suppose, really. And as I said, Lyons is going to take time to settle back, but he was, monumental player for Waterford when he played, before he went to Australia. I'll go to lads. I think Waterford, I won't call it a shock, because I think they did impress against Clare the last day. I suppose defensively, they did concede 2-33. That's something, I suppose, that they'll have to, can't let Tipperary score that. Tighten up a little bit at the back. I suppose maybe vary the play a little bit, but they're, I suppose they're hurting. They've had years of hurt, and I suppose, as Leo said there, with the minor All-Ireland final win last year, I suppose they know, there's going to be young players coming, and I suppose the whole county is probably on a bit of a high compared to what it has been the last few years. So yeah, I go with Waterford as well, but I don't think there's going to be much in it.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, guys. Yeah, I'd probably go on with you as well. I think Limerick, if they can steady up for the first 10-15 minutes against Cork, because Cork will come out all guns blazing. I think middle third wise, Limerick do hold an awful lot of aces there, and I think that Tipperary performance for me, particularly third quarter, the dip in intensity and just how Cork really did control stuff, particularly in defensive matchups, I thought was quite significant. I think it's a do or die fixture for both teams. Look, Waterford have to reproduce here with this group of players. I'm thinking of the likes of Peter Hogan here, Kevin Mahoney, Patrick Curran, guys like that coming off the bench, Ozzie Gleeson as well. I'm going to kind of give them the vote. There's probably a point, 2 points in it, because look, realistically, I think guys, either Waterford or Tipperary, are probably looking down the barrel on Sunday afternoon. Guys, we might leave it there. It's been a good one tonight. Many thanks to Leo O'Connor, who's been travelling from Tullamore back down to Nina for us. Many thanks, Leo. All the best with Offaly for the rest of the season anyway. No, thanks for your time. And thanks to Rory and Kieran. Yeah. I know we didn't get to Joe McDonough tonight. Round 1 did see a significant result up in Antrim, with Down accounting for Antrim. Also Carlow beating Laois, and also Westmeath with Williams in top form, beating London, and some intriguing fixtures next weekend. So we'll run the rule over that, as well as round 2 of Leinster and Munster. I suppose until then, guys, many thanks. Enjoy the games over the weekend, and we'll chat next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.